Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Richardson. I'm your host, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Connor Stiles. Connor had a really good idea for this episode, so I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away, Connor, and explain what this episode is all about.
This episode is all about people that have made an influence on us who may not have necessarily realized that they made an influence on us at the time. So it's just us sharing experiences about experiences that we had that may have seemed small to the people that we were interacting with, but really had an effect on us.
Yeah. And we also want to make sure that we qualify all those people that do good for us regularly and are a huge part of our lives. We want to acknowledge those people as well and how important you are to us and how much we love you. But this episode is specifically about people that have done kind of quieter acts of goodness for us in our lives that made a really big impact, but maybe they don't know the full implications of those things that they did. Is there anything else we need to qualify? Like, because I'm thinking about like family members, and I'm not going to talk about in this podcast. And I love all of my siblings and my parents, and I love all of my friends. But this episode is more about, again, those people that kind of quietly did good. Did I miss anybody?
No, I think that covers it. We love all of our family and friends, and
Yes.
and they've obviously had a huge impact on us. But these are just kind of more unique experiences where people probably didn't think they had an impact on us, but did. I'm sure our friends and family probably know that they have a huge impact on us. So these are for those, those lesser known positive influences. Even though I think we both will be talking about a family member.
Yeah, we will. Yep. I have a family member on my list, but we're walking on eggshells here trying to protect people's feelings and everything. We love everybody. All right, Connor, how do you want to do this? Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I can go first.
Take it away.
And I guess I will start with the family member on my list. I had an experience with my dad a long time ago. This was when I was in high school. I was mowing lawns, and I didn't mow very many lawns. It's a very small lawn business. I think I mowed like 3 or 4 lawns a week. But
It seems like a lot.
well, there are definitely, I have friends who have siblings who they have like 20 lawns they mow every week. I don't know how they have time for that. I was busy with 3. But in order to mow these lawns, I would drive our GMC Yukon XL and pull a trailer behind it. And I would just drive around to the different lawns that I mowed and would mow. And it was just really convenient being able to use just one of my parents' cars to do it. And I usually did pretty well towing a trailer behind me. But there was this one day where I needed to turn around, and I turned the wheel a little bit too much, and I ended up kind of jackknifing our trailer, and the trailer went up and underneath the bumper.
Nope.
And it was stuck. So here I was in this neighborhood, just in the middle of this intersection kind of. I was off to the side, but definitely not conveniently placed for people that had to drive around me. Luckily, it wasn't a busy neighborhood. But I knew that the trailer had gone up underneath this bumper, and I was afraid that if I just tried to straighten out, it would just tear the bumper. It was a metal bumper, so it would tear rather than like shatter or something or just crack like a plastic bumper. But I saw this. I called my dad because that seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And he picked up, and I said, "Hey, Dad, I jackknifed the trailer and it's stuck underneath the bumper. I think if I pull forward, it's just going to tear the bumper. What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Hang tight for a second. I'll come and look at it." So he drives over, and the first thing he asked was, "Which side of the bumper is it?" because my older brother also mowed lawns before me, I inherited the lawns that he mowed. And my brother had also jackknifed the trailer at one point and pulled forward and tore one side of the bumper. So my dad was like, is it at least the same side? Because if so, then not a big deal. It's already torn. But I was like, no, it's the other side. And so he gets there, and I was expecting him to be mad. I was expecting him to be angry for not being more careful when I was driving. I thought he was going to be upset because I made the same mistake that my older brother had made. But when he got there, he was completely calm, and he looked at the bumper, and we tried getting it out from underneath, the trailer out from underneath, but we couldn't do it. And so he said, okay, get in the car and start pulling forward. And I was like, that's going to tear the bumper though. And he said, I know. And so I got in the car and started pulling forward, and it starts tearing. I can hear it, but the car's moving forward. It's getting the trailer out from underneath. And I can just see my dad in the rearview mirror. He's just kind of shaking his head. He doesn't look thrilled. But the part of this story that impacted me is that he never like got mad. He never said anything like, how could you do, like, why did you do this? Why weren't you being more careful? He just showed up to help me, and he never got mad at me. He never said like any passive aggressive comments about it after that. I mean, we joke about it now. And it's something we just laugh about, but just the fact that I damaged one of his cars unnecessarily, and I mean that's something I could see some people getting upset about, but just the fact that I damaged something of his and he didn't even get mad at me had a big impact on me. So now even sometimes something will happen and I'll sit there and think, man, I kind of want to get mad right now. Especially if like someone damages something of mine or something like that. But just kind of thinking back on that experience kind of reminds me, physical possessions aren't really that important. It's more important to keep the relationships strong with people and not damage those by getting angry. That's more important than, I guess, making yourself feel better by yelling or getting upset.
Wow, that's an awesome story. I feel so good inside. That's a great story. My first thought was, I was just thinking about like why your dad was able to stay calm and everything. And I don't know all the reasons, but I wonder if it had something to do with just like his son reaching out to him, asking for help, which I would imagine as a father is a great feeling, knowing that your children look up to you and depend on you. But even then, yeah, the fact that he didn't get frustrated at all and was able to stay level-headed, especially where there cars driving by and people who were watching all of this happen? Or were you in the middle of were you surrounded by people who were witnessing all of this?
Luckily, there wasn't too much of a crowd.
Oh, okay.
It was mostly just us.
Good. Well, that's really cool. Man, what a cool, intimate sort of experience with your dad. Cool insight into his character as well.
Yeah.
Connor, when you found out that I had eaten your entire Costco supply of chocolate-covered almonds, did you have to take a step back and check your anger before?
Yeah, I had to take some deep breaths. No, that honestly made me laugh a lot more than anything. I mean, if they had been my coconut chocolate covered almonds, that might have been different. But since it was just the chocolate covered almonds, I was able to handle that a little more gracefully.
Yeah, I appreciate your mercy and kindness in that moment. They were just sitting in your room and you were gone for like days on end, so I just started nibbling on them, and then eventually I just couldn't help myself and ate the whole thing. But that's a great story to start out. Man, that's really cool. I respect your dad. I mean, I already respected your dad, but I respect him a lot more because of that story. So that was awesome. My first story is about a girl from my study abroad. Kind of some backstory here, not to get too much into the details, but I was I was testing a medication for mental health. I think I was on 2 different medications, and I went on the study. I was hoping that before the study abroad began, I would have had the medications figured out and been doing well. But the study abroad rolled around and medications were not working, but I didn't want to stay home from the study abroad because we were going to be visiting England, Wales, Scotland, and France. And then I was going to go visit my parents who were living in Romania at the time. So I didn't want to miss it. So I went anyways. Long story short, the medications were not great at all. So I was having all of these terrible symptoms and side effects. And then halfway through the study abroad, it got bad enough that I started to wean off of those medications. And then I had all these like withdrawal symptoms. So I was surrounded by a group of people that I didn't know. I was in a country that I was unfamiliar with, which I love England, so it's nothing against England. I was still able to enjoy a lot of the things that I did there, but I was in a country that had healthcare that I was unfamiliar with. I was away from my family and doctors and even like a therapist. Just all of those things that I normally had as resources to support me were not there. And then the group of people that I was with, there was just a bunch of really young, mostly young girls who had just gotten out of high school. And then there were some other married couples, but it really wasn't a group that I felt like I had a lot of, I wasn't connecting well with a lot of people in the group. So I didn't feel like I had much support. And as you know, when you're in low mental health places, you kind of put up walls and you don't really want to be around people as well. So there was that happening. But there was this girl on my study abroad. Her name was Isabella. And she just noticed me and noticed that I was struggling and became someone that just talked to me and asked me how I was doing throughout the entire study abroad. And she was the only person that I felt like during our conversations truly understood what I was going through. And there were other people who were trying to be nice and everything, but most people had no idea what I was going through. But she did. And there was one point in the study abroad where I eventually like checked myself into a hospital. That's how bad mental health was getting. And I remember shortly after that, we were traveling up to northern England in a place called Ambleside, which is a small town outside the Lake District. Very beautiful place. And I remember we were staying at this hostel, and she knew that I was having a really hard time. So she took a glass from the hostel. She stole, which maybe I shouldn't mention her last name so that it just doesn't get traced back to her. But she took a glass from the hostel and kept it in her backpack. She didn't show me, but she just asked if we wanted to go on a walk. So we went on a walk along these cobblestone roads in this little English town. And we eventually found our way to a stream and walked alongside the stream. So we were distanced from everybody else, kind of had some separation. She pulled out the glass. I'm like, did you steal that? And she's like, yes, I did. She brought a marker. She did that classic thing where she had me write all of the things that I was really struggling with on the glass. And then we were going to shatter it. And I was just like really surprised that someone had taken that much interest in me, in my well-being. Anyways, I wrote all those things on the glass. I threw it against a tree. The glass was really strong. It didn't break. So that was fine. And then I tried to throw it against rocks and it still didn't break. So we just kind of left it there, I think. I'm not going to read too much into the symbolism of all of that. But anyways, and then that evening we just laid on the grass and we just looked up at stars and chatted. And I just remember being so grateful that I had somebody on this trip. And I don't think she knows how grateful I was for her. And I still had all my walls up and stuff. So I was pretty shy and quiet and reserved, but she made that trip bearable. I don't think I would have been able to make it through if she hadn't been there as a friend, showing genuine love and concern for me. So she is the first person on my list, Isabella. Very grateful for her.
That's amazing. It's amazing how meaningful it can be, even when someone doesn't necessarily understand exactly what you're experiencing, when they're just willing to kind of sit there with you and just try to be a support during that time. That's incredible.
And what amazed me about her as well was there was a lot of other people that I mentioned were pretty young. So I felt like I think I was like 23 or 24 at the time. So I wasn't much older, but I feel like they hadn't really experienced hardships of life. Isabella was also very young. I think she was like 19 or 20. But for some reason, she was one of those young people that had experienced some harder things in life. So she had that relatability as well and was able to talk about difficult things in a very mature and empathetic sort of way instead of just breezing past things. And I just remember being amazed. I'm like, you're so young, but you like get things. And I was just very grateful. And I thought as well that she was going to continue to have significant impact on people that she interacted with in the future. So very grateful for her. Okay, Connor, who's your second person?
My second person may actually be kind of cheating because it's a group of people. But my last year at college, I became really good friends with this apartment of girls. There are 4 girls in the apartment. It was Hannah, Kemi, Emily, and Bren. And they did a lot of just very meaningful acts of service for me. We became so close. I think I actually spent more time at their apartment than I did at mine. But we just did so much together, and just that entire year, they were just always there to celebrate the highs with me. They're there to be sad with me in the lows. They really helped my mental health in a lot of different situations. And we're always just a very strong source of support. We're still in contact. We try to have like a weekly Zoom call where we catch up, but they just really accepted me just with open arms. They had a wall in their apartment where they had their pictures, the 4 of them. And then eventually they're like, Connor, you're essentially part of the apartment. So they put my picture up there along with Hannah's boyfriend's, well, now husband's picture. But it was just nice because we got so comfortable with each other and got to know each other well enough to where they could, I think, read me really easily. And I could just kind of say anything I wanted to around them because I could trust them just with my whole thought process. And it was just such a relief to just have a group of friends that just did so much for me and always wanted me there. So there were lots of specific instances where they really had an impact on me, but I just want to highlight just essentially the whole year because they honestly just changed my life just with our friendship. And I hope that they're going to be lifelong friends where we continue to have an influence on each other like that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love those relationships where you're just wholly accepted and you don't feel like you don't have to be on your guard at all. And to be able to have those types of people that you're so comfortable with that you can just be yourself. That is an amazing thing. And I'm really glad that you had those people. And now that I'm thinking about it, that was the year that after living together for like 4 or 5 years, we decided to kind of take different paths in terms of living situation. And I was sad that I was losing you as a roommate, but you felt good about moving somewhere else for some reason. And I'm glad that you did, that you met these people. It seems like that was meant to be, that these friends came into your life at that time. And yeah, that you were just able to gain a good group of friends like that that hopefully stay lifelong. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely, like, in my mind, I definitely felt like I needed to go to that apartment complex. Back then, I was hoping that it would be because I was going to meet my wife there or something. Obviously, that didn't happen. But, yeah, there are times where I regret that decision just because I wish that I had stayed with you to live, to be roommates that last year. But I think that apartment of girls, Hannah, Kemi, Bren, and Emily, I think they were the reason why I did feel like I should go live in that apartment complex, because those just became very important relationships to me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally believe that was higher power's hand in your life kind of directing you that way. This is one of the cool things about like gaining experience and getting older. You are able to just look back on your life and be like, that was not coincidence at certain aspects. Like, I can think of the time where we first moved in together as roommates freshman year. We've talked about this before, but that was not coincidental. I feel very strongly that was meant to be, that you and John and Max and Josh were supposed to be in my life at that time. And you guys were those friends for me that you have described with this apartment of girls, but just people that I could be really comfortable around. And I can look back on my life and see other instances where people were placed in my life, or our paths kind of crossed at a necessary point in my life where I needed extra help and support. And I think it's just so cool that someone is looking out for us and cares about relationships in our lives, because he knows that like life is difficult and relationships are probably the most meaningful part of life. So he's like, I'm going to give you support and friends, even though other things are going to be difficult. These people will help you through challenging things.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate what we said at the beginning, other friendships I've made are also incredibly meaningful, especially with you, and especially the people that we were rooming with freshman year. Incredibly meaningful relationships. Can't imagine my life without them. And
sorry, was I getting a little defensive there of our friend?
No,
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that you and the others know that I feel just as comfortable bearing my soul to you.
Oh, no,
and our other.
Sorry, I did not mean to come off that way. I get what you're saying.
You didn't at all. I'm just reiterating that.
I understand that I, as a guy, can't do the same things for you emotionally that women can, Connor. So, well, that's really cool. No, I genuinely am grateful that you had those friendships. And another interesting thing, like you brought me over to that apartment to meet those friends a couple times. And, what's interesting is that they weren't people that I myself felt like my personality clicked with them. But the fact that they worked so well with you was a really awesome thing. And I think that's interesting because we have completely different personalities. We get along really well. It's just interesting that people have different social and emotional needs. And I think that's also a cool part about how the people that come into our lives at different times for specific reasons, they fulfill different needs for us. And I think that's really cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my second person. My second person is a professor at university, Michael Lavers. He was a poet. He had a couple little kids and a wife, and he taught my capstone class. So one of the last classes that I took while going to school. This is why Michael impressed me. Professor Lavers. He was an extremely anxious person, and he was pretty open about it. It was really interesting, his dynamic with the class. He was at times so anxious about stepping on other people's feet that he would be like, "Oh, I think you guys might have better answers for this question," or "I think you guys might know better than I do." Kind of in like a self put down sort of way, but he was just so like anxious is one word for it, but I also think like sensitive is another word, which a lot of people look down on and think, well, it's kind of bad to be sensitive. But I was so impressed with him. He didn't have any of the pomp and circumstance and haughtiness that other academics have. He was a peer, and he just respected you, and he cared about your opinions. And I think it was in large part because of these mental health challenges that he had been struggling with, but it had like softened him where he was really empathetic towards other people. And I remember going to talk to him when I was stuck on something in my capstone paper and struggling myself. And he just had so much like sympathy for my circumstances, whereas other professors maybe would have been like, okay, everybody's struggling, you need to get over it. But he like was just really understanding, and he was willing to work with me through things. And then when I finally finished the capstone, which he had helped a lot with and had been very patient, I feel like I was way behind the rest of the class in writing that paper. I was given an opportunity to present the paper, and he was in one of the rows watching me present. And I just remember him looking like proud or happy that I had been able to work through challenging things. And so I was just really grateful for just his understanding and his kindness, and that all of his challenges had made him kind of into that loving, caring, understanding person. And it kind of set a precedent for me. Like, I don't have to have all of my mental health problems figured out in my life to do good. Because I've thought that way before. I'm like, man, I have to have my anxiety under control. I have to have OCD or depression or whatever else under control before I can really contribute. Because I worry about like my career and relationships and how mental health is going to impact all of those things. But Michael taught me, as a professor at a university, who's really just quiet and a timid person, but he taught me that regardless of whatever challenges you have, you can still make an extremely positive and large impact on people who are around you. And so in that way, mental health isn't like a black or white sort of thing that happiness is dependent on. You can still be struggling with things, but do so much good. So that was my second person that I thought of.
Yeah, having
Did you have any
people...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, having professors like that is amazing when they not only help you academically, but are also kind of an example for you in other aspects of life.
Yeah. Did you have any professors like that? You felt like you could, I mean, you were in a very different program. Like English is like all about the feels and relationships. I don't know what the accounting program was like, but did you have professors who were similar?
Yeah, I had incredible professors who you could tell that they were very academically focused, but they also cared about us on a personal level and were always willing to talk. So yeah, I had a lot of great professors. I didn't quite have a relationship with them like you did with yours, but you could tell that they were there for more than to just teach us accounting.
Yeah. Doesn't that inspire you to just be like, no matter what status I achieve in my life or position or whatever, I just always want to stay down to earth and just care about other people as a primary objective more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's cool. All right, Connor, who's your next person?
My next person is also a teacher. He's a professor now, but at the time he wasn't. He was a teacher I had in high school. And at my high school, we had the option to take a religious class during the day. And he was my teacher for that class. And he is honestly, his name is Danny. That's not what I called him because he was my teacher at that point. But his name is Danny, and he is honestly just one of the most caring and loving and compassionate people I've ever met. He makes everyone feel super important. And it's whenever you talk to him, he just lights up. He's extremely happy when he talks to people. He is very complimentary. He just sits there telling you how great you are and how awesome it is that you're doing well in life or whatever progress you're making. He's there celebrating it with you. And if you're having a hard time, he's there to kind of offer, an arm around the shoulders and kind of just feel it with you. But when you're there talking with him, it feels like you're the most important person in the world to him, just because he has that type of demeanor and way of interacting with people where you can feel the care that he has for you.
Do you think that's something that comes naturally to him, or do you think that's something that he intentionally had to work on?
I think maybe a bit of it could have come naturally, but I think that is something that he's just worked on until it actually just became a part of his character. Yeah,
that's really cool. I love those types of people that are able to show care and love, but in a way that isn't fake, because that there are those people that are like, they just try and win influence and attention, right? And so they're really nice for those reasons. But those people who are just like genuinely authentic, good people who care about you, that's pretty impressive. That's really cool.
It's that's a trait that I want to develop. And it's because I've seen it in him.
Yeah. Yeah, that just makes me think bigger picture as well. Not to get too existential, but those moments in your life when you're like, life is just hard, and what am I getting in return, or why am I not getting the things that I hope I would be getting out of my life? And to be able to flip your mindset and to be able to think about people like your teacher who made it their life's mission to just be kind to other people and uplift other people. I imagine even though he probably had his own struggles in his own life, but he got a lot of fulfillment and joy out of thinking about other people and trying to be that person for other people.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
That's awesome. Okay. My third person, Braden Duke. I was living in Sweden at the time, serving a church mission. And I had gone a year into my mission. This predates study abroad, by the way, and predates the story with my Professor Lavers. But this was the first year that I'd really experienced. All my stories have to do with mental health, by the way. I hope that's okay. But I mean, mental health takes you to the lowest points, and that's when people may have the biggest impact on you, right? So, so that was the first year that I had really been struggling with mental health. Similar sort of situation in study abroad where I was out of country. These church missions are 2 years long for guys. I was about at my year mark. So I was living in Sweden. I was living in this area called Skövde, which is in the middle of Sweden, but also in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of a garbage town. No offense to anybody that lives there. I didn't enjoy it. I was also pretty depressed at the time. But so missionaries have a companion that they work with. So Braden Duke was the guy that I was living with at the time, and we were just spending most of our day together every day, and we hated each other. Well, I shouldn't say that. I did not vibe with him. It was a combination again of really low moment with a really bright personality who I feel like we just weren't having the same sorts of experience, and it really threw me off. And this is the first time that I'd really lived that close quarters with somebody else that first year, having that sort of experience. It was really difficult. I just felt kind of suffocated in a lot of ways. So we were living together for months, and as we were getting close to the end of our time together where one of us was going to move out of the city and go somewhere else. We took this bus ride out to a place, and the city is spelled Hjo. It's pronounced Yo. I just wanted to spell it out so people didn't think the town was Y-O. Yo, Sweden. But anyways, it was like this little place. It was on the lakeside. It was really beautiful. And I was just kind of silent on the bus ride, and I kind of kept to myself, walls up, as per usual when I'm in a low moment. And he was sitting next to me, and it was a rare moment where we started to get vulnerable about difficult things that we were going through. And at this point, I think I just started to open up about some of these things. And his response it just blew me away. I was expecting him to not understand and to not get it. And I think at some level he didn't understand because he hadn't had severe mental health challenges at the time. But his response was so empathetic and kind. And he was the first person that was like, Josh, is what you're going through like depression? Because I was just thinking, I had no idea, like I had never experienced it before. I should probably preface that. I had never experienced it before, but I was really struggling and I did not know where to turn. I was like very helpless. And he was the first one that pointed out what it might be. And then he also shared the story of Job, which if you don't know the story of Job in the scriptures, it's essentially about someone who goes through extremely challenging things. And Job doesn't understand like why are all of these terrible, hard things happening for me? And eventually there's redemptive side of the story where it's like Job's suffering was intended to make him into a stronger person who had a better relationship with God, who was wiser, who gained more things at the end of his life because of his hard experiences. And he just like elaborated on this story of Job, or pointed me towards the story of Job in a way that was really hopeful and beautiful. And also because of him, on that single bus ride, I went and finally got help for my mental health problems. It took some tests to see what was going on and figure out that I was struggling. And he was the one that kind of started me down that path of getting help. So it was just so interesting to me that this person that I didn't get along with, and I feel terrible because I really did feel like I treated him poorly through our time together. He was the one that brought this light and compassion and understanding into my life. And I thought that was so interesting. I'm just really grateful for him. And the way that he pointed me in the right direction.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to just see that sometimes those moments, that encouragement can come from what seems like a very unlikely place.
The most unlikely sources, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad that you were able to have that experience with him. I'm sure it kind of changed the relationship you had with him. After that,
I think so. Yeah, by the time we left, which was I think only a few days later, we separated. I think I had respect for him that I didn't have before, and I think, we just had a little bit more love instead of anger and frustration. Yeah. Which I'm sure there was still a little bit of that, but it is interesting, like what you said, like things that help you coming from the most unlikely places. That does help. Like when you're looking for help in your life, there are some things that you can rely on, but a lot of times I think in like a black and white sort of box, like help has to come from these places, but it's worth being open to different sorts of people or different sorts of experiences. And you might be disappointed, but you also might be surprised. And it's better to be vulnerable and try and create relationships with people instead of closing yourself off, because you never know who might help you. So that's cool. Okay, Connor, who's your fourth?
My fourth is a man's named Sasha, who I actually also met while I was serving a mission for our church. And I was in Germany. At this point, I think I was living in Mannheim. And there's this man named Sasha that we saw pretty regularly. He was just this very big, friendly guy that really cared about the missionaries. He's also a member of the church, and we saw him pretty regularly. He'd always have food for us when we'd visit him. And he had a period of time where we just didn't see him, but then we just randomly saw him on the street again one day, and he was like, you need to come over to my apartment. And so we went with him, and he had this, I think he had planned on having us over, and he had this bag of groceries because he wanted us to have some food while we were just visiting him. And so we go up into his apartment, sit down at the table, and he pulls out 2 kilos of yogurt, which is almost 4.5 pounds. And he has all of these things that he wants to add into the yogurt. He has a bag of raisins that he puts in. He has this jar of jam that he puts in all of it. He puts in all of it just to give it flavor. So we have probably around 5 pounds of this yogurt mixture. And my companion and I were sitting there thinking, we hope he's not expecting us to eat this all, because we'd probably die. But we're sitting there, he starts serving us some yogurt in just these little bowls. So we're like, okay, the bowls are little, he can't expect us to eat that much.
Did you have lactose problems at this time?
No, thankfully no.
Thank heaven.
Yeah, I can, yeah. So we were eating this yogurt, and he even says at the beginning, he says, don't worry about it. You don't need to eat all this. We're like, okay, we're good. So we finish our bowl of yogurt, and he starts putting more in. And we're like, oh, we're good. And he said, just have a little bit more. He's barely eating any of this. And so we have a little bit more. And then after that, he goes to give us more yogurt. And we're like, Sasha, we can't eat any more yogurt. And then he kind of just gets like this look on his face. His demeanor just changed. And he seemed really sad all of a sudden. And he said, guys, I've been having a really rough time lately. Like, I haven't been able to find work, and I'm like out of money. He said, I can't even pay my electric bill anymore. He said, my fridge doesn't work right now. Like, I have nowhere to put this yogurt, and so it's just going to go bad. And so he said, if you can, please eat it just so it doesn't get wasted. And so then we're like, oh my goodness, we have to eat this yogurt. Because he was living in an apartment with no power, and was obviously struggling. And so we put it down. We both ate over 2 pounds of yogurt and felt so sick. But the part of the story that had a real strong impact on me was the fact that he was pretty much just flat out broke. No money, couldn't pay his electric bill. But when he invited us over, he still felt like he needed to give us something to eat, even if it was just a lot of yogurt. And to him, providing that service for us was worth the money that he had to spend on it, which was, he didn't have much. So that was just a very touching moment for me, where someone with nothing was really eager to give us something and was willing to maybe do something that would be detrimental to himself later on, because that was money that he couldn't spend on other things. And it was just a really humbling moment.
Yeah. Wow. What a contrast to materialistic minded people who, and I can put myself in that category sometimes, who cling to things. It's like difficult to let go of things, especially when you're in dire circumstances like that. And the fact that he was still interested in helping you guys, well, that's really cool. That's awesome. I would call those people pure in heart, who want to do
Oh,
the right
absolutely.
thing, even though they're in difficult circumstances themselves, and they face outward, even though a lot of other people would be just turning inward. So,
Yeah.
and it's interesting as well. I was thinking, like, people show love and care in different ways, and maybe for you guys, like, just having him vocalize his support for you would have been enough. But for him, like, giving gifts or giving food was a way that he could feel like he was helping you. And that's just really interesting and cool. So
Yeah.
you don't stay, do you know where Sasha is right now and what he's doing? Do you stay in touch?
I don't know where he is, but he'll randomly message me on Facebook and just say hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't have much contact, but still a little bit.
Thank heavens for people like Sasha who are givers instead of takers.
Oh,
That
yeah.
reminds me, oh my gosh, remember we were talking about Prince of Egypt on one of our past episodes, and they have that song Through Heaven's Eyes. I don't know if we talked about that one specifically on the podcast, but you know that, do you know that song? It's like,
I
how do
don't
you measure
remember
the
it very
worth of a
well.
man through what he got or what he gave? And the whole message is like, even though people have nothing in their lives, how you measure their worth is like through the things that they're giving to other people instead of just taking in, which I thought was an applicable song and message for Sasha.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, my fourth person, James Sorge. He was in one of my last congregations that I was going to, my church. I was in this setting with a bunch of other guys, and usually in our Sunday school classes, when you bring up vulnerable things in a room full of guys, the typical guy response is either like, let's just move on, or let's give advice for the thing that you're struggling with. A lot of times guys just have a difficult time like validating or being as sensitive. When we were in Sunday school classes with women and men, there was a little bit more like, I'm so sorry, that's a hard thing that you're going through. Anyways, it had been a difficult week for me, and I try not to do this all the time, but I had a question that I asked the class that I thought would be like an applicable challenge that other people might be going through at the same time. And I kind of wanted to start this conversation because I was like, I partially want validation for something difficult that I'm going through, but I know other people are going through it as well. But anyways, that same thing happened that typically happens, or is like a lot of comments were made where it was like, oh, let's just move on to the next thing. Or we just kind of skip past that. Like, oh, Josh, that was a very interesting question. Let's move on. And you know, when you're having those conversations with people where you're like, I'm hoping to get some validation for my feelings. And obviously, like, seeking validation all the time isn't the most healthy thing. You want to be able to validate yourself, and everybody's working towards self-validation. But there are times where you're at lows and you're like, I desperately just need someone to acknowledge what I'm going through is difficult. So all these other comments were being made. I was getting really discouraged. I'm like, oh my gosh, makes me feel terrible. And then James Sorge, in this class, he just raised his hand, and the teacher called on him, and he turned towards me, and he's like, I am sorry. That sounds like an extremely difficult thing that you're going through, and I don't have the answers. I just want you to know that I'm sorry that you're going through something so challenging. And it was such a beautiful moment. It just taught me, like, sometimes the most helpful thing that you can do for someone is to just listen and acknowledge. And if you have a choice between like advice giving and just offering love, 95% of the time, just offering love is going to be way more helpful and motivating for that person who's going through it than advice giving. And maybe this is just a guy thing, but advice giving is such a strong natural reaction when someone talks about a problem that they're going through. It's like, let me fix it. Let me offer solutions, which is just so frustrating because no one else knows exactly what you're going through. And so James taught me a really important lesson. I tried to find him after and tell him how much it meant to me, but I don't think my words did an adequate job expressing how grateful I was. But yeah, that was a moment that kind of reshaped the way that I think about how I interact with other people. And I want to be a support giver instead of an advice giver now in my life. And if people ask for advice, maybe I'll give it. I think it's not a bad thing necessarily, but primarily I want to be someone who just validates, loves, tries to understand without like stepping in there and being like, I know what would help you in your life, sort of thing. I'll leave that advice giving to professionals, but in my interactions, I want to be a supporter.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that when you said 95% of the time, people are usually looking for just love rather than advice. I think that's definitely true. It seems like usually when people actually want advice, they usually ask for advice. But when they're just talking to you and explaining their feelings, I think that the vast majority of the time, they're just looking for validation, for love, just some sign that you recognize what they're going through, not even necessarily understand it, but just recognize it and maybe try to understand it.
Right.
But I think that has such a big impact when people are just willing to listen.
Yeah. And implied, just going off what you said, implied in advice giving is like this reminder that you're not doing something right. Because if someone's giving you advice, then the feelings that you're having and the thing you're going through must be like a perceived as a negative thing that you have to fix, which is really interesting. Whereas when someone offers support and love, essentially what they're saying is like, you know, what you're going through is a part of the human experience. And I'm sorry that you're at that low. It doesn't mean that you've necessarily done anything bad or wrong. You're just struggling like the rest of us do at times. And I'm really sorry that you're at a low point like that. And it just, yeah, removes some of the shame, I think, as well. Okay, Connor, who is your last individual?
My last individual, her name is Maylee, and she's someone that we actually both know. She lived in the same apartment complex during our second year at college, and we were friends. We would do stuff together sometimes. And so she messaged me back in November of just this last year, and we hadn't talked in forever. We don't talk often. It's been a year since we've talked, but she just randomly sent me this message and just told me, it was a really long message, but she told me that she had been going through some journals or something like that recently and was looking at an entry back from, I think, like 2018. And in this entry, she had talked about how they had been spending some time with us. We had a group that was doing some stuff, and everyone kind of eventually left. It was at our apartment, and eventually it was just me and Maylee, just talking, hanging out, and I don't even really remember this, but I guess we were having a good conversation, and then eventually she left, and I guess I sent her a text that said something along the lines of, "Hey, thanks for being so encouraging. You're amazing." And so then fast forward to just this last November, and she told me, "You have no idea how meaningful that conversation that we had and that text was at the time." She said that at that point in time, she was really struggling with mental health and was just looking for some validation, for love, for just something that she could hold on to. And apparently just me sitting there and talking with her and then just sending her a quick text after, apparently that was something that was incredibly helpful for her and kind of just gave her a little bit of light in a really dark time that she was having. Well, years had passed since that, I guess, interaction. I don't remember it. She randomly messages me this in November, and something that she didn't know is that November was an incredibly hard month for me. It was one of the hardest months I've ever had, just really poor mental health. And I was at a really low point and just struggling, honestly, to just make it through each day and trying to just find some bit of happiness. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we went years without talking. And then Maylee reaches out to me and I think kind of provided a little bit of whatever I provided for her back in 2018. She sent me this message that just made me feel valued and cared for and loved. And that was just this glimmer of light that I really needed at that time. And Maylee was actually kind of the inspiration for this episode, because she was someone that I had an interaction with. I had no idea that it had an impact on her, but years later I found out that it had a pretty significant impact on her. And in turn, she had a really important impact on me when I needed it. And so I think that there's just so many people out there that we have impacted in a very positive way that we just have no idea about, just because they never mentioned anything. And I also wanted this to be kind of a way for us to share impacts that people have had on us that they may not recognize. I just think that, honestly, when people have a positive impact on us, we should let them know, because I think it honestly feels great to be able to thank people for what they do for us. And I think that it can have, in turn, a really positive impact on them, knowing that they are influencing people for good.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better. Hear, hear. And that story is amazing. It teaches you so many life lessons, and you did a good job of summarizing them succinctly. But you're right. My gosh, like, let's never hesitate to let people know the good things that they're doing for us in our lives, because everybody is going through it. And just like Maylee did for you, maybe people need to know of the impact that they're making. And that is a really cool story. Whether you believe in karma or just believe in doing good things. I think your story is evidence that makes me think about all similar experiences in my own life where doing good things for other people brings good things into your life. Whatever those good things may be. In your instance, it was some loving kindness at a moment where you desperately needed it. Also, I'm sorry that you had such a hard month in November. Yeah, that was painful to watch. It's always hard to watch someone that you care about going through something so challenging and feeling like you don't really know how to help that person. So thank heavens for Maylee and her reaching out to you and
Right.
uplifting you.
And that there are lots of other people. I mean, you also were a very strong source of support for me at that time too. So it also, I guess, just shows the importance of just being there for people, and just how important it is to have people that you can turn to.
Yeah. Man, it just makes you want to like go out right now and just like, I'm going to tell everybody the good things that they're doing in their life. Yeah.
All right, who's your last person?
Yeah. My last person is my brother, one of my brothers. I have 4 brothers. This is one of my brothers. He's the brother that's right above me. His name is Jacob. I've told Jacob how much this meant to me. I don't think he understands how much it meant to me, though. But I had a year post study abroad. I came home. It was that year that we were living at the Brittany. And you remember this because you were in my room, my roommate. You remember when Jacob would call me pretty much every morning and we would have little convos? So my brother Jacob called me pretty much every single morning for that year, an entire year, which is like, okay, that's quite the commitment. He has a job and he's married and he has other things going on, but he knew that I was worried about mental health. He had had some similar struggles in the past, and he called me every single morning to do some talk back to negative thoughts exercises and to just be a support for me in my life, to make sure that I was starting my day out right. And so we would always talk in the morning before we started our days. That year was perhaps one of the happier college years that I had had. Freshman year was obviously delightful, and then we all went on our missions and then came back, and I had a difficult year after that, a difficult year or two after that. But this year was one of the happier years of my life, and I attribute it mostly to having Jacob call me every morning. And as I reflect on that year, I'm like, what was it about Jacob calling me that made it such a happy year? I think it was honestly just having someone who knows what you're going through support you in your life. And it was just connection. And because Jacob talked to me and we were able to be open and vulnerable about worries or thoughts that we were having, anxieties that we're having, and just address them in a safe space every morning, then those thoughts didn't hold me down the rest of the day. And I was able to go to school and have a good time. I was able to interact with other people and have a good time. And obviously not all of the challenges were removed, but I just knew that somebody loved me and cared about me in my life and had a daily reminder of that. And it was one of the most beautiful, loving things anybody's ever done for me. And yeah, I don't know what more to say other than I'm just extremely grateful. And that love that he showed me, like I already respected him for a lot of different reasons, but Jacob will always have a deep, deep place in my heart because of that experience alone. Like no matter what Jacob does in his life, no matter what things happen in the future, foreseen or unforeseen, whatever challenges he faces, or even if there's ever rifts between us, I don't think there will be, but I will always have love and respect for him because of that time that he took to call me and check in on me. And I think it also opened the door for me. I haven't been nearly as consistent as he was for me for other people, but it did give me motivation to try and support other people in similar ways. And my sister was going through something challenging at the time, so I was able to get help from Jacob and then turn to my sister and help her in the same way. Or like I had a niece that was going through something difficult. I was able to get help from Jacob and then help my niece. So really, Jacob ultimately was helping a lot of different people by helping me, which I thought was really cool. He probably doesn't know the full extent of the impact that he had on me, but yeah, I'm grateful for him.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Good old Jake. Do you had any other thoughts since we have been talking this whole time? Any other like principles or life lessons, takeaways that you've been thinking about that you want to share?
I think I already mentioned kind of the main ones that are on my mind. Just number one, to show gratitude to people for the things that they do for us, make it known, the impact that they have on us, just because that act of gratitude and letting them know can in turn have an impact on them. And I think that everyone wants to feel important. Everyone wants to feel like they have an impact, and letting them know is just a small way that we can show people that they're doing amazing things and having a really positive impact on the people around them.
Hear, hear. People want to feel like they're doing good, and people are doing good. They just don't recognize it a lot. And yeah, you said that very well. I would also say one other thing that I want to add is just, if you try and be a good person in your life, there will be opportunities given to you to do good. It's very interesting when I try and shift a mindset to try and be more like service oriented. There are always opportunities to help somebody else. People will be put in your path that you can help. So I think that's a really interesting principle. If you seek to do good, you will have opportunities to do good. Then also on the flip side, if you need help in your life, I would just really try and pay attention with eyes open wide to the ways that other people are helping you in your life, and maybe things or people that you take for granted. But I really do think life is all about relationships, and we're given ample opportunities to help other people and to be helped. And I think it's worth noting those experiences. So I have like other people that I could talk about, and I know that you do too. If we really sat down and thought about it, I'm sure there would be a long list, but I'm glad we were able to highlight just 5 people each who have made an impact in our lives. And I guess we just both wanted to say thank you to those people for the good that they did for us and the ways that they helped us. And anything else, Connor, that you want to say?
No, just grateful for all the people in my life.
Yeah, same. All right. Well, I guess that concludes this episode of the Young Men podcast. Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure, a very wholesome conversation. So I hope we can have more of these conversations in the future with future episodes. And we will talk to you next time.